I always believed that betrayal came loudly, through slammed doors, raised voices, or some dramatic confrontation. I never imagined it could slip into my life quietly, tucked inside a phone call I wasn't even meant to hear. It was the Monday before Thanksgiving, a gray afternoon with a chill that seeped into my bones. I returned home from the grocery store with both arms aching under the weight of bags packed with everything needed for a holiday feast. 16 pounds of turkey, fresh herbs, the cranberry jelly my son Michael always pretended he didn't like but finished anyway. I'd always cooked too much. Years of feeding students at school events had made abundance a habit. When I stepped into the kitchen, the familiar warmth of home greeted me, along with something else. Faint voice, a digital echo, a sound that made me freeze mid-step. My tablet, lying on the counter, screen lit blue. It was on a call, still connected. Michael's voice spilled out, clear enough to slice through me. He won't last more than a day after our Thanksgiving plan. Then the house is ours. My grip loosened. The grocery bags slid from my hands and collapsed onto the floor. Carrots scattered. Apples rolled away like startled mice. I thought I misheard. I prayed I misheard. Then Jennifer's voice followed, dripping with excitement I had never realized she was capable of faking so well. Once we sell this place, we can finally move to Westwood. I'm so done living in this old man's museum. My museum. The home I built with my late wife. The home I'd invited them into a year ago when Michael lost his job. I leaned on the counter, trying to breathe through the ringing in my ears. My son's face on the screen was animated, cheerful, discussing my death like he was planning a game night. I swallowed hard. Every word was a blade. Perfect timing, Michael said. He'll be in such a good mood with all the family nonsense. He won't see it coming. Jennifer laughed. My fingers trembled as I tapped the red button and ended the call. Silence washed over the kitchen. Heavy. Suffocating. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the blackened screen, at the faint reflection of my own stunned face. I'd given them everything I had left. My home, my money, my trust. And in return, they had plotted my erasure. I pulled out a chair and sat, slow and deliberate. The room felt colder somehow, like winter had slipped in through the vents. The apples that had rolled across the floor rested against the cabinets. Little red witnesses to the moment my world tilted. My knees ached from the walk upstairs, but the pain now was different. Deeper, older, carved straight into the heart. For the next hour, I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply replayed every memory, every moment I had softened myself for them. Michael at age 6, clinging to my leg on his first day of school. Jennifer hugging me the day they moved in, promising they'd contribute and help around the house. Months of excuses, hundreds of small lies wrapped in smiles. I had mistaken manipulation for love. And now the truth stood naked before me. When the front door finally opened around 6 that evening, their laughter floated in first. "Dad, we're back," Jennifer chirped. "Sorry we're late." Michael's interview went long. I wiped the expression from my face, the way I had done countless times in 35 years as a school principal, when parents stormed in angry and irrational. I knew how to control my features. I knew how to perform calm. So I smiled. A small, steady smile. "Oh, how did it go?" My voice didn't crack. Jennifer hugged me, all warmth and perfume. She never hugged me unless she wanted something. "It went great," she said brightly. "We just have a training program they're requiring before hiring. It costs a bit, but totally worth it." I pulled the roast from the oven, the one I had made hours earlier before they had destroyed my appetite. The smell should have comforted me, but instead it made me nauseous. "How much is the program?" I asked, turning to set plates on the table. Michael shifted nervously. 2,000, he said. "Dad, it would mean a lot if—" "I'll think about it," I cut in smoothly. For the first time in months, I saw genuine confusion flicker across their faces. Because I had never said, "I'll think about it," before. I had always said yes. That night, after they retreated to their room, giggling, whispering, unaware of the storm rising, I sat in my study with my old leather briefcase. I opened my laptop and began searching. Elder law attorney, Portland. Property protection. Cases of financial abuse by adult children. I wrote notes, questions, procedures. My old instincts returned, the same instincts that helped me navigate crises at school, calm parents, defend students, manage budgets. I wasn't helpless. I had forgotten that. But now, I remembered. By the time the clock struck midnight, I had a plan, the skeleton of something sharp and strategic. My son and his wife wanted a Thanksgiving surprise. So did I. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Michael's voice replayed in the dark like a cruel echo. He won't last a day after our Thanksgiving plan. Eventually, I gave up on sleep and sat in my study chair listening to the old house breathe. This home had weathered storms, birthday parties, Mary's laughter, Michael's tantrums, final exams, graduations, and now it sheltered a threat sitting right under its own roof. The betrayal didn't make me cry. It made me alert. By sunrise, my decision was made. A lifetime of leadership had trained me well. When chaos entered the building, you confronted it with preparation, not panic. I dressed carefully, navy blazer, pressed shirt, old principal's tie, the one Mary had gifted me the year I became head administrator. I didn't wear it for sentiment. I wore it to remind myself who I used to be before grief softened me. At 8:30 a.m., I walked quietly downstairs. The house was silent. Michael and Jennifer were still asleep. They rarely woke before noon unless brunch was involved. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Out for an appointment. Back later. Nothing more. Nothing that would raise suspicion. They didn't deserve explanations. The attorney who felt like a lifeline. The legal office was located downtown, in a building with mirrored windows and polished stone floors. The receptionist smiled politely, but her eyes flicked toward my tie, perhaps sensing the combination of fear and determination under my calm exterior. "Mr. Ford? Ms. Lindstrom is ready for you." Barbara Lindstrom stepped out of her office, hand extended, eyes sharp behind rectangular glasses. She looked like someone who won battles before breakfast. "Mr. Ford," she said warmly, "please come in." Her office felt unexpectedly human. Watercolor landscapes on the wall, a framed photo of 2 children, and a plant that looked far healthier than any I had ever owned. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. Slowly, carefully, using the same methodical tone I used during disciplinary hearings at school. My voice didn't break until I reached the part where Michael laughed about me dying. Barbara's expression hardened. "They said that exactly?" she asked. "Verbatim." She nodded once, not in sympathy, but in recognition. The type of nod someone gives when a puzzle piece falls into place. "Mr. Ford, you're not just dealing with adult children taking advantage of you," she said. "This is targeted exploitation, possibly even premeditated harm." Hearing someone else say it aloud made the room tilt for a moment. Barbara waited, letting me breathe, offering silence instead of pity. "What do I do?" I finally asked. She turned her laptop screen toward me, displaying Oregon's property and elder protection laws. "We start by securing what they want most, your home. Of course, the house I had worked 35 years to pay off. The house Mary and I had filled with memories. The house Michael was already pricing out with a realtor. I don't want them getting a single brick of it," I said quietly. Barbara didn't hesitate. "We'll make sure of that." For the next hour, we devised a strategy. Document everything. Stop all financial support. Prepare for legal removal if needed. And above all, do not confront them yet, she warned. If they're planning something on Thanksgiving, you must stay several steps ahead. I nodded. I had learned that long ago. Never show your hand until you must. When the meeting ended, she handed me her card. Then she paused, took it back, and wrote a number on the reverse side. "This is my personal cell. Call if anything feels wrong. Any hour." Her expression softened. "You're not alone in this." Those words struck deeper than I expected. A home filled with lies. When I pulled into my driveway later that day, their car was already there. The curtains in the living room shifted subtly. They were watching. I stepped inside to find them seated on the couch, hands folded, expressions rehearsed. "Dad, you're home early," Michael said, voice syrupy. "Where did you go?" Jennifer asked too quickly. "Around," I answered. I moved to hang my coat, pretending not to notice the tension tightening between them. "We were thinking," Michael said carefully, "that we should talk about future plans, for the house. And for you." A cold laugh almost escaped me. "For me? How generous." Jennifer slid a stack of papers across the coffee table. Power of attorney forms, already filled out, their names typed neatly. Michael added, "We just want to help manage your finances. You've been stressed, forgetting things." I stared at the papers, at the lines where they expected me to sign my life away. "I'm not signing these," I said. Jennifer's smile faltered like a crack in painted porcelain. "We're just trying to support you," she said sharply. "I don't need your support," I replied. "Not on this." Michael's mask slipped, if only for a second. "What lawyer did you see today?" he demanded. So they'd noticed more than I expected. "That's none of your concern," I said simply. The air changed. The temperature. The atmosphere. Jennifer spoke again, quieter now, more dangerous. "You're making choices without consulting us. And I will keep doing so." Finally, Michael slammed the papers into a drawer. "This isn't over, Dad." I met his eyes, the same eyes I watched light up when he took his first steps. "It is for tonight," I said. "I'm going to bed." I climbed the stairs with the slow, steady confidence of someone who had stopped being afraid. In my room, I locked the door. For the first time since Mary passed, I felt the need for a barrier. Through the walls, their muffled voices carried, urgent, angry, plotting. My phone buzzed. A text from Barbara. "Check in. Everything all right?" I typed back, "They're suspicious, but I'm safe. More tomorrow." I placed the phone on my nightstand. Tomorrow was Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, the day everything would shift irreversibly. I closed my eyes and began planning the next move. Wednesday morning arrived quietly, but my body felt wired as if I'd been running all night. I woke before dawn, the sky outside my window still a shade of deep blue. My house creaked gently, old wood settling, heat pipes rattling, the familiar noises of a home that had held decades of memories. But I no longer felt safe in it. I moved through the darkness like someone avoiding tripwires. The floorboards had specific places that groaned when stepped on, and after 30 years of living here, I knew exactly which planks to avoid. Downstairs, the kitchen was cold, a thin frost clinging to the edges of the window. I brewed coffee quietly and wrote a note for Michael and Jennifer. "Out early. Back this afternoon." No explanation. No lies. No need. They would wake late anyway. By 7:15 a.m., I was out the door and driving toward Barbara's office. Every turn of the wheel felt like a step toward reclaiming my life. Fear still lingered inside me, yes, but it had begun transforming into something sturdier, something sharper. Determination. The final meeting before the storm. Barbara was already waiting when I arrived. She stood outside the building in a dark coat, her breath visible in puffs against the cold. "You're early," she said, a hint of approval in her voice. "So are you. We've got a big day ahead." Inside her office, we spread out the paperwork one more time. The property transfer documents, residency protection, the notarization forms. Everything had been prepared down to the smallest clause. "You understand," she said, her tone firm but kind. "Once you sign today, legally, the house won't belong to you anymore." "I understand." "And you're sure?" I exhaled slowly. This house was supposed to go to my son one day, but he made it clear what he intended to do with that inheritance. "I won't hand over a weapon to someone who wants to use it on me." Barbara nodded once. "Then let's finish this." The foundation. At 10 a.m. sharp, we entered the Portland Education Foundation offices. The building was modern and bright. Open windows, hanging plants, the faint smell of freshly brewed coffee. It felt like a place where futures were shaped. Julia Thompson, the foundation's director, greeted us with a professional yet warm smile. "Mr. Ford, thank you for meeting with us. We're honored by your decision." "It's the right choice," I said honestly. She guided us into a glass-walled conference room. Sunlight spilled across the long table, illuminating neat stacks of legal documents. The notary sat ready. 2 foundation board members were present as well, witnesses. Julia explained each page, line by line, ensuring that I fully understood what I was signing. When she reached the clause transferring ownership of my home to the foundation, she paused. "This is permanent," she said gently. "Irrevocable." "I know," I replied, "but I'd rather give it to education than let it fall into the hands of people who see me as disposable." Barbara glanced at me. There was an unspoken understanding between us, solidarity, even admiration. Steadied me. I picked up the pen. My signature felt like a final stroke on the last page of a long, painful chapter. The notary sealed everything. The board members countersigned. Julia uploaded the digital copies to the county system. "Congratulations, Mr. Ford," she said softly. "The property is officially transferred." Just like that, my son could no longer inherit the house. My son could no longer use the house against me. My son no longer had anything to gain from my death. A weight lifted from my chest so suddenly it made me dizzy. Barbara placed her hand on my arm. "It's done. You're safe." For the first time in days, I believed her, seeing my home through new eyes. When we returned to my house around 1 p.m., the sky had shifted to a calmer shade of gray. I invited Barbara inside. "This place, it meant a lot once," I said. "Still does," she replied gently. She walked through the living room, and I saw it as she saw it. The faded photographs, the worn recliner, Mary's knickknacks on the shelves. Not outdated, not worthless, lived in, loved. She paused beside a framed photo of Michael at his high school graduation. I stood behind her. "He looks proud," she murmured. "He was," I said. "Back then. People change, but that doesn't erase who they were," she said softly. I wished I could believe that, but betrayal had a way of rewriting memories. We had coffee at the kitchen table. The house felt different, not physically but spiritually, as if its destiny had been redirected. It no longer felt like something I was defending from predators. It felt like something I had rescued. "What happens after tomorrow?" Barbara asked. "I haven't thought past surviving Thanksgiving," I admitted. She smiled gently. "Think past it now." Her meaning was clear. She wasn't asking as an attorney. She was asking as someone who had begun caring more than she expected. I didn't answer. Not yet. But something inside me warmed. She left around 3 p.m. I watched her car pull away down the street, and the silence that followed felt less threatening than usual. For a moment, because at 7 p.m., Michael and Jennifer came home. They carried shopping bags, laughing too loudly, acting too cheerful, the kind of cheerfulness that tries to mask tension. "Oh, we got decorations for tomorrow," Jennifer said brightly. "Turkey centerpiece, fall candles. Stuff to make dinner special." She placed a glossy bag on the dining table. But my eyes weren't on the decorations. My eyes were on her purse. She kept glancing at it. Subtly, then not so subtly, always checking it was still there. And suddenly I knew. Whatever they planned for Thanksgiving, it wasn't just some vague scheme. It was real. It was prepared. And it was most likely already bought, hidden, ready. Jennifer's purse. Always within reach. Always under watch. I played along. 5 o'clock tomorrow works, I said calmly. "I'll do most of the cooking." They smiled. I smiled back. We all pretended nothing was wrong. Thanksgiving morning arrived with the kind of quiet that feels staged. Not peaceful. Not comforting. Artificial. Like a calm painted onto chaos. I woke before sunrise, not because I was eager to start cooking, but because I hadn't slept more than a few restless minutes at a time. Every creak in the hallway, every rustle from downstairs made my pulse jump. By now, the house felt less like a home and more like a stage where someone else controlled the script. But today, the script belonged to me. I removed the chair I'd wedged under my bedroom door. I'd spent decades in this house and never once locked myself away from my own son. But those days were over. The staircase felt longer than usual. Every shadow looked like a warning. I kept expecting Michael or Jennifer to appear suddenly, but the house was dead silent. They never woke up early, especially after nights spent whispering behind closed doors, plotting who knows what. Fine by me. I needed space to prepare. The preparation. I tied an apron around my waist and began the Thanksgiving ritual Mary and I had followed for years. She always believed good food soothed heavy hearts. Maybe she was right. Turkey seasoned and placed in the oven at 7:30 a.m. Pie crust rolled and filled by 8:15. Stuffing assembled by 9. I moved through each step methodically, as though each slice of carrot and sprinkle of spice added one more layer to the shield I was building around myself. At exactly 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Barbara, you okay?" I replied, "Cooking, preparing, ready." She responded instantly, "Stay alert. Call if anything feels off." Just seeing her message steadied me. By noon, the kitchen smelled like warm bread and roasted herbs. A deceptive comfort. A mask over the truth. At 2 p.m., I heard movement upstairs. Footsteps, then muffled conversation. They were awake. I paused with a spoon in hand, listening. Jennifer's laugh floated down the hall. Too cheerful. Too bright. A laugh rehearsed in a mirror. Moments later, they came downstairs, trying to look casual. "Smells amazing, Dad." Michael yawned loudly. Jennifer's eyes drifted instantly. Not to the turkey, not to the table preparations, but to her purse sitting on the counter. She checked it. Subtle, but not subtle enough. Her fingertips brushed the zipper reflexively. Guarding something. Something meant for me. I turned back to slicing sweet potatoes and kept my face neutral. Setting the table. By 4 p.m., we began arranging the dining table together. Jennifer hummed an off-key song, pretending this was a normal holiday. Michael unfolded napkins with nervous precision, his hands trembling slightly. Mine didn't tremble at all. I brought out Mary's china set, a tradition, gold trim, hand-painted rims. Beautiful, irreplaceable. I looked at them and thought, she would have known something was wrong. Immediately, she always saw what I didn't. I wished she were here, just for a moment. Just long enough to remind me that I wasn't crazy for fearing my own son. Jennifer placed her purse near the coffee pot again. The same spot she hovered around last night. Always within reach. Always positioned like a snake coiled and waiting. I counted her glances. One when she sat down. One when she adjusted a candle. One when she moved a fork slightly. Another when she opened the cabinet, pretending to look for serving spoons. For glances in under 5 minutes. She was guarding something dangerous. The final hours before dinner. At 4:45 p.m., I stepped outside onto the porch under the pretense of checking the weather. Cool wind. Gray sky. Dead leaves rustling across the driveway. But outside wasn't what mattered. Inside was. Through the window, I watched them whispering over the table. Michael leaned in, frustration on his face. Jennifer gestured toward her purse with agitation. He shook his head. She shook hers. They were arguing quietly but intensely. I slid my phone from my pocket and began recording through the window's reflection. Even without hearing their words, the body language told me everything. Michael tapping his wrist impatiently. Jennifer mouthing, "Not yet." Michael nodding toward the dining table. Jennifer touching the purse again. Michael pointing toward the kitchen where I stood moments ago. They were timing something. Timing me. I stopped the recording when the turkey timer dinged. Time to play my part. Dinner begins. At 5 p.m. sharp, I placed the turkey on the table. Beautiful. Golden. Perfectly roasted. Jennifer clapped dramatically. "Oh, it looks amazing." Her eyes flicked. Purse. Back to me. Forced smile. I pretended not to notice. "I'll pour the wine," she said sweetly. Of course she would. She carried the bottle to the kitchen counter, standing exactly where her purse waited. She poured 3 glasses. I watched her reflection in the microwave door. A trick I learned during staff evaluations when people lied with their faces but told the truth with their hands. Her free hand slipped into her purse. Came out with something small. She crushed it between two fingers. White powder. Quick. Practiced. Stirred into one glass. My glass. She returned to the table, placing the drinks carefully. Strategically. She set the drugged glass directly in front of my plate. "Shall we toast?" she asked, voice bright. I reached for the glass. She watched my hand. Eager. Too eager. "You know," I said casually, "I forgot the gravy boat." I stood up. She turned her head toward the kitchen. 2 seconds. That's all I needed. I slid my glass sideways. Moved Michael's in front of my plate. Switched them with the delicate skill of someone who once performed magic tricks at school assemblies. When Jennifer returned, she didn't notice a thing. Michael raised the glass. "To Dad," he said, swallowing hard. "For everything." I raised mine too, the untainted one. "To family," I said. We clinked glasses. We drank. 20 minutes later, Michael's fork slipped from his fingers. He blinked slowly, eyes unfocused, head tilting. "Dad, something's wrong." His head dropped onto the table with a heavy thud. Jennifer screamed, but I remained calm. I had been waiting for this moment, because help was already on the way. Right on cue, the doorbell rang. The doorbell rang again, firm, timed, deliberate. Not the polite tap of a neighbor. Not the hesitant press of a lost delivery driver. This was a doorbell rung by someone who knew exactly why they were here. Jennifer turned slowly, her hand still gripping Michael's slumped shoulder. Her face had gone white, drained of every trace of arrogance and confidence she'd flaunted for months. She whispered, almost choking on the words, Who is that?" I didn't answer. I walked to the door with steady steps. Measured, calm. The exact demeanor I used when walking into a room full of panicked teachers during school emergencies. All those years of managing chaos had prepared me for this moment. I opened the door, and the cavalry waited on my doorstep. Barbara stood front and center, dressed professionally despite the holiday. Beside her was Julia Thompson from the Portland Education Foundation. Behind them, notaries and 2 uniformed police officers, Officer James Cole and Officer Samantha Rivers. And farther back, a paramedic team with a gurney, ready for exactly what had unfolded inside. "Mr. Ford," Officer Cole said calmly. "May we come in?" "Please," I replied. They entered the house like a storm front. Organized, efficient, unflinching. Jennifer's mouth hung open. Her gaze darted from person to person, trying to understand, trying to calculate an escape route. Barbara placed her leather portfolio directly on the dining table beside the untouched Thanksgiving dishes. The turkey steamed between us like a grotesque centerpiece to the confrontation. "Jennifer." "Michael," Barbara began, her tone sharp as a courtroom blade. "This is Julia Thompson. She represents the Portland Education Foundation, the legal owners of this house as of yesterday." Jennifer blinked hard, shaking her head. "That's impossible. And oh, that's not legal. He would never." "He already did," Barbara replied. "And the documents are filed with the county. This property is no longer yours to inherit, manipulate, or exploit." Julia set down the official county filing forms, stamped and verified. "This is real and permanent," she said firmly. "Mr. Ford retains lifetime residency. Neither of you have any claim here." Jennifer stumbled backward, her hand covering her mouth. Michael, still unconscious, groaned on the table. Officer Cole stepped forward. "And now for the second matter." He motioned to Officer Rivers, who pulled on forensic gloves and began photographing the table, the wine glasses, and the spilled drink in front of Michael's drooping hand. She bagged the glasses carefully, labeling each one. "Ma'am," Rivers said to Jennifer, "please step away from him. Do not touch the victim." "Victim?" Jennifer sputtered. He's fine. He just fainted." "That's not what's happening," Officer Cole said, lifting Jennifer's purse from the counter. "We have a warrant to search this." Jennifer lunged forward. "Don't touch my bag." The officer blocked her easily. He unzipped the purse and retrieved a small prescription bottle. The same color, shape, and size I'd noticed last night. He held it up. "These pills were filled yesterday," he said. "Full bottle. But several are missing. You want to explain that?" Jennifer's eyes went wide. Those are anxiety pills. Mine. That doesn't mean." "Then where," Officer Rivers asked, "are the missing pills? The ones crushed into powder?" Jennifer tried to speak, but her voice broke. Rivers held up a labeled evidence bag containing the wine glass Michael drank from. "This glass will be tested, and the sedatives in his system will match the contents of this bottle." Jennifer's face twisted in panic. "You don't understand," she cried. She pointed at me. "He switched the glasses." Officer Cole looked at me. "Is that true?" "Yes," I said simply, "because I saw her drug mine." Jennifer let out a strangled scream. "You can't prove that." Barbara opened her portfolio and slid out photographs and a USB drive. "Actually," she said coldly, "we can." She placed several printed images onto the table, screenshots of the video I recorded through the window earlier. Jennifer and Michael whispering, pointing, gesturing toward the purse, planning. These stills, combined with the chemical tests and Mr. Ford's statement, Barbara said, are more than enough. Officer Cole read Jennifer her rights. She tried to speak, to bargain, to blame Michael, but her voice drowned beneath the officer's calm recitation. The moment the officers led Jennifer out of the house, screaming my name like I was the one who betrayed her, the entire room seemed to exhale. For hours, tension had lived in the walls, thick, metallic, choking. And just like that, it broke. The house felt lighter. But the night wasn't done. Officer Rivers and the paramedics lifted Michael carefully onto the gurney. His head lolled to the side, eyes half open but unfocused. He tried to speak, but all that came out were slurred, broken sounds. One of the EMTs looked at me. "Sedatives in someone his age and size? He'll recover, but this could have been fatal. You probably saved his life without meaning to." The irony of that burned. Jennifer had expected me to be the one wheeled out tonight, not her husband, not my son, not the young man I'd held the night Mary died, when he was too shocked to cry and too afraid to sleep alone. Now I watched him being carried out like a stranger. The paramedics pushed the gurney through the doorway and into the ambulance waiting outside. Lights flashed silently. They'd kept the sirens off out of respect for the neighbors. But there was no hiding the truth. This house, once quiet, had become the epicenter of a disaster. When the ambulance pulled away, the street went still. Inside, Barbara closed her portfolio. Her voice softened for the first time all evening. "Take a breath, Dit. It's over." But she was wrong. This chapter was closing, yes, but the story wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The legal storm. We sat at the dining table, the same one where Michael collapsed. Now cleared, cleaned, stripped of evidence. Officer Cole walked us through what would come next. "Mr. Ford, your statement is already on record from earlier this week," he said. "The video and photographs your attorney provided will be held as evidence." "And the lab results?" I asked. "They'll return within 24 hours, he replied. "But from the bottle, the residue on the spoon, and your attorney's provided surveillance, we have more than enough probable cause." Barbara leaned in. "They won't be walking free tonight." "No," Cole agreed. "Not tonight. Likely not for a long time." Hearing that should have brought relief. Instead, grief crept into my chest unexpectedly. Grief for what? The son who plotted against me? The daughter-in-law who smiled at my dinner table while preparing to kill me? No, I was grieving something deeper, the illusion that I still had a family. The illusion I'd clung to far longer than I should have. Barbara stays. After the officers left, the house fell silent again. Too silent. Barbara stayed behind, insisting on making me tea. She had traded her professional posture for something gentler, a witness of pain rather than a strategist for war. I watched her move through my kitchen with ease, opening cabinets without asking, fetching mugs as though the house recognized her kindness. "You saved yourself," she said softly as she poured the water. "But you also saved others. How many cases go unnoticed until it's too late? You acted early." I shook my head. "I should have acted years ago. I should have seen the pattern." "Why didn't I?" She set the mug in front of me. "Because you're a father," she said. "And fathers forgive too easily." A moment passed where neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the wall clock, a clock Mary loved. I stared at its hands moving steadily, reminded that life continues, even after betrayal. After a long silence, Barbara gently placed her hand over mine. "You're not alone anymore." Her words wrapped around me, warm, grounding, unexpected. I didn't realize I'd been trembling until she touched me. The letter. The next morning, as sunlight bleached the gray sky into something softer, Barbara returned with more news. Michael had woken up in the hospital overnight. They were keeping him for observation due to the amount of sedatives in his system. Jennifer remained in custody. "His attorney requested permission to send you a letter," Barbara said. "You don't have to read it." But I did. The envelope was thin, the handwriting rushed and sloppy. My son's handwriting. I opened it. "Dad, I'm sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. I swear I didn't know she would actually do it. She said it was harmless. Just something to make you sleep. I didn't think. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'm your son." I folded the letter. No tears. No anger. Just a quiet, exhausted sadness. Barbara watched me closely. "What will you do?" "I don't know yet." "Do you want to respond?" "Not now. Maybe not ever." Michael's words weren't accountability. They were desperation. He wasn't sorry for planning to take the house. He was sorry because the plan failed. There's a difference. The deal. 2 days later, Barbara returned again. This time she carried a folder with a clipped stack of papers. "Prosecutors offering a deal," she said. "Attempted assault with a dangerous substance. 5-year no-contact order. 3 years probation. Community service. Plea avoids trial. And Jennifer? She'll receive the same charges, if not more. The evidence is strong." I considered it quietly. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even punishment. It was a boundary finally drawn. "I agree," I said. Barbara nodded, relieved. "They'll never step foot in this home again," she said. I looked around the living room, a space filled with history, memories, laughter, grief. A place nearly turned into a crime scene by the people who should have protected it. "No," I agreed. "Not again." The future stirs. Later that night, Barbara sat with me by the fireplace. Flames cracked softly. Snow fell outside. The storm was quiet, but steady. "What happens now?" she asked. I looked into the fire. "I live," I said simply. For the first time in a long time, I actually planned to live. She smiled gently, leaning her shoulder against mine. "And not alone," she whispered. I didn't pull away. I didn't want to. The days that followed the arrest felt like stepping into a different world. One where the floor didn't shake beneath my feet, where every sound wasn't a threat, and where I no longer flinched at the thought of footsteps behind me. Freedom, after living under quiet terror, comes in strange shapes. Sometimes it's just waking up without your heart hammering. Sometimes it's hearing your own breath and realizing it's steady. Sometimes it's making morning coffee and not wondering whether someone switched out the sugar. For the first time in months, my house felt like mine again. But healing wasn't simple. It wasn't a straight line. And it certainly didn't happen quickly. Michael's second letter. 3 days after part 6, another letter arrived. Barbara placed it gently on the table. "You don't have to read it," she reminded me. But curiosity, or something close to grief, pushed me to open it. "Dad, please listen." I didn't know what she planned. She just said she wanted you to rest. "I swear I didn't want to hurt you. Can we talk? Just once? Please." This time his handwriting was steadier, clearer, as if he finally sobered from the fog of Jennifer's influence. Or maybe from the drugs she fed him by accident. But the words still rang false. He hadn't apologized for his motive. He hadn't apologized for talking about my death as though it were a schedule. He hadn't apologized for watching me struggle financially and choosing silence. He only apologized because the plan failed. I folded the letter again. "I can't respond," I said quietly. Barbara nodded. She understood far more than I ever had to explain. The ghost of holidays passed. Thanksgiving had been ruined beyond repair, but December crept in quietly, dusting the neighborhood with silver frost. Houses lit up with decorations. Wreaths hung on doors. Children dragged sleds down the sidewalks. For the first time in years, I didn't decorate. Not because I was sad. Surprisingly, I wasn't. I simply didn't feel the need to perform anything. Not cheer, not nostalgia, not tradition. For decades, holidays meant family gatherings. Meals, stories, laughter. Now they meant something else entirely. A reminder that family could fracture without warning. Like thin ice cracking beneath your feet. On the 3rd of December, I found myself staring at an old ornament Mary bought shortly after we married. A glass angel with chipped wings. I held it gently, remembering the warmth of those early days. The house was quiet, peacefully quiet. For once, the silence didn't feel like a threat. A visitor. One chilly afternoon, the doorbell rang. My chest tightened, the trauma still fresh enough to send my nerves firing. But when I opened the door, the fear melted. Barbara stood there, holding a container of warm soup. "You weren't responding to my texts," she said with a teasing smirk. "So I assumed you forgot how to eat." I stepped aside. "Come in." She walked in like she'd lived there for years. Comfortable, familiar, rooted. She placed the soup on the counter, then turned and looked at me with a softness that made my throat tighten. "How are you holding up?" she asked. I sat down, letting the warmth of the kitchen wrap around me. "Some days feel easy," I said honestly. "Some days not so much. It's complicated." "I know." She sat across from me. "Trauma doesn't vanish just because justice was served." I stared at my hands. I keep wondering if it was my fault. If I raised Michael wrong. If I gave him too much. Not enough. I don't know. Barbara reached for my hand, squeezing gently. "You raised him with love," she said. "But you raised him in a world that's messy. Sometimes people choose darkness over the light handed to them." I swallowed hard. "Doesn't make it hurt less." "No," she whispered. "It doesn't." We sat quietly for a while, the soup steaming, filling the air with chicken and thyme. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until I lifted the spoon. Warmth spread through me, tasted like comfort, something I hadn't felt since Mary died. A new pattern. In the weeks that followed, Barbara fell into a rhythm with me. Slow, gentle, unspoken. She checked in often, showing up with groceries or tea or simply a conversation. She wasn't replacing anyone. She wasn't filling a void. She was simply there. I didn't know I needed that until she gave it freely. One evening, she brought over a stack of donated books from the Education Foundation, classics, histories, memoirs. "For your winter reading," she said. "You always said you loved old biographies." I smiled. "I did. I still do." She placed the books on the coffee table, then hesitated. "Did I want to ask something?" I looked up, sensing the shift. "Go ahead. Would you like to spend Christmas Eve with me?" Her voice carried no pressure, no expectation. Just an offer, a bridge. I felt something inside me soften, but fear whispered too. Fear of moving too fast. Fear of trusting anyone again. Still, "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." Her smile was small but radiant, warming the whole room. The choice. Still, one decision remained, the hardest one of all. Would I ever forgive Michael? The prosecutor called me the next morning with the final plea agreement. Michael would avoid jail time if he admitted guilt and kept distance for 3 years. Jennifer would be facing harsher penalties for tampering, administering harmful substances, and attempted coercion. "Your son wants to meet you," the prosecutor said. "Face to face. It's optional. Your choice." I didn't answer right away. That afternoon, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the empty chair across from me. The one where Michael used to sit when we watched football, when he did homework, when he grieved his mother. I imagined him sitting there now, older, harder, shaped by choices I still struggled to understand. Could I face him? Would I recognize him? Would he recognize the father he betrayed? As the sun set in streaks of orange across the living room floor, I realized something. Forgiveness wasn't a demand. It wasn't a responsibility. It was a path, one I could choose now or later or never. But I had to choose something. And I finally did. When I agreed to meet Michael, the world seemed to narrow into a single point. A point I had avoided for months, maybe even years. I wasn't sure whether I was walking toward closure or reopening a wound that still hadn't healed. But I knew one thing for certain. I had to look my son in the eyes. Not for him. For myself. Barbara insisted on going with me. Not inside the room, she respected the personal weight of the moment. But she drove, and she stayed outside, waiting in the hallway like a quiet anchor. The courthouse had that sterile, echoing coldness government buildings always carried. The fluorescent lights buzzed above us. The floors smelled faintly of disinfectant. Every footstep sounded louder than it should have. A young clerk led me toward the meeting room. "Take your time," she said kindly. Time. It was all I'd had these past few weeks. Time to unravel, time to question, time to accept. But forgiveness? That was something else entirely. The room was plain. Beige walls. A single table. 2 chairs. A small recording device on the corner because every meeting related to an open case had to be documented. Michael sat inside already. His back was hunched. His hands trembled slightly. He looked smaller. Not physically, but spiritually, like his arrogance had been carved away and replaced with fear. He didn't stand when I entered. He didn't know whether he was allowed to. I closed the door behind me and sat across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He finally lifted his head. "Dad." One word. Fragile. Barely a whisper. But not enough. Broken mirrors. Michael looked awful. Dark circles under his eyes. Hair unkempt. His skin had the dull gray tint of someone who hadn't slept, eaten, or understood the gravity of his life until too late. I could still see traces of the boy he once was, the boy Mary adored, the boy I raised with pride. But adulthood had chiseled him into someone I no longer recognized. "What do you want to say to me?" I asked quietly. He exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding his breath for days. "I'm sorry," he said. Same words as the letters. But now his voice cracked. "For what?" I asked. He blinked, confused. "For everything." "No," I said. "Tell me what everything means. I need to hear you say it." He swallowed hard. "For what Jennifer planned," he said. "For not stopping her. You helped her plan it." He flinched. "I didn't know she'd actually drug you." "She drugged you too," I said. "Because I swapped the glasses." He rubbed his face with shaking hands. "I know," he whispered. "I know." And when I woke up in that hospital bed, I realized what could have happened. What almost happened because of us. He still said us. "You were willing to let me die for the house," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The truth itself was a strike. Michael started crying, silently at first, then heavier. Tears streaked down his face. "I didn't want you dead," he insisted. I wanted a future I didn't have to struggle for. We were drowning in debt. Jennifer kept saying the house was rightfully ours, that you didn't need it anymore, that I didn't need it because I was old?" I asked coldly. He bowed his head. "I'm so ashamed. I was stupid, weak. I let her fill my head with poison long before she touched that wine glass. I let that sink in. He wasn't lying. But he wasn't innocent either." "Do you hate me?" he asked suddenly, voice breaking. "Hate? No." What I felt was heavier, older, like grief that had finally accepted it would never go away. "No," I said. "I don't hate you." He looked up, startled. "But I don't trust you," I continued. "And trust is what makes a family." Michael's mouth trembled. "I can earn it back." "Not today," I said. Maybe not ever, but that's something you have to rebuild. Not with empty apologies. Not with guilt. With choices. Real choices. He wiped his face. What do I have to do? Serve your sentence, I said. Take accountability. Stay away from me like the court ordered. And find out who you are without someone else, Jennifer or anyone, telling you who to be. The words cracked something inside him, but he nodded. I will, he whispered. I promise. I stood up slowly. He remained seated, looking up at me like a child being left at school on the first day. Dad, do you forgive me? He asked. I looked at him, really looked, and I finally spoke the truth I'd been carrying. Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through, I said. It's a road, and right now, I'm still standing at the start of it. Michael nodded, tears streaming again. He understood. I walked to the door and opened it. Before I stepped out, I added, I hope you find the man I raised, not the one you became. Then I left him sitting alone in the beige room. Barbara outside. Barbara stood as soon as she saw me. You okay? She asked, touching my arm lightly. I didn't trust my voice yet, so I just nodded. She guided me out of the building, her presence steadying me with every step. When we reached the parking lot, the cold December air hit my face like a cleansing wave. You survived the hardest part, she whispered. Not the hardest, I said quietly. The hardest comes after this. She understood immediately. Healing, redefining, rebuilding, life. She squeezed my hand. Then you won't face it alone. The days after meeting Michael felt strangely hollow, like I just walked through the ruins of a house fire. Everything looked familiar, but nothing felt the same. I returned home with Barbara, and she stayed for tea before heading out. But even after she left, her presence lingered, gentle, grounding. Yet inside, a different storm was taking shape. Not the panic from before. Not the dread of an imminent attack. This was quieter, heavier, a reckoning. Because the hardest realization wasn't that my son had betrayed me. It was that I had survived it. And surviving forces you to confront the entire landscape of your life. The good, the bad, and the truths you avoided. The house that kept breathing. Winter weather settled in fast. Snow collected along the edges of my porch. Cold seeped under the door frames. The house groaned more often, old beams shifting against temperature changes. For months, every sound had terrified me. Now each creak reminded me that this house was still mine. Still standing. Still safe. And I was still standing too. One morning, I brewed coffee and wandered through the rooms slowly. Mary's old knitting basket sat untouched in the guest bedroom. A stack of photo albums lay on the coffee table from when Barbara helped me organize them last week. The smell of pine drifted from the candle she'd brought over. Everything was changing, but not in a way that hollowed me out. It felt like an evolution. The sound of the snowplow passing outside finally broke my thoughts. I drew the curtains and watched the world brighten under the morning light. Safe. Such an underrated word. The court decision. 3 days after the meeting with Michael, the prosecutor called. Mr. Ford, the plea agreement is finalized, she said. Your son has accepted full responsibility for his involvement. And Jennifer? I asked. She's facing 2 separate charges. Tampering with consumable products and administering harmful substances. That case is proceeding toward a much more serious sentencing. I closed my eyes. Thank you. It wasn't joy, not relief, just closure. The door that had been half open, letting fear in, finally shut. Now a new one waited to open. The night of reflection. Later that week, snow fell heavily, blanketing everything in a silent white glow. I made myself dinner, a simple bowl of soup, and carried it to the living room. The house was warm but quiet, too quiet. As I ate, I noticed the framed photograph above the mantel. Mary holding baby Michael, her smile peaceful, tired, and full of hope. I stood in front of it for a long time. I'm sorry, I whispered, not because I'd done something wrong, but because I felt like I'd failed to protect what we built. Then something unexpected happened, something I couldn't explain. I felt peace. Just a moment of it. A fleeting but solid warmth. Maybe it was acceptance. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was Mary reminding me that I was still here, still fighting, still choosing life. Whatever it was, it steadied me. Barbara returns. The next afternoon, Barbara stopped by with a bag of groceries and a soft smile. "You didn't have to bring anything," I told her. "I know," she replied. "But I wanted to. And if you keep saying no, I'll just switch to dropping things on your porch and running away." I laughed. A real laugh. One I didn't have to force. We cooked dinner together. She chopped vegetables with the precision of someone who enjoyed routine, and I stirred the pot with the familiarity of decades in the kitchen. At one point, she touched my shoulder lightly. How was the meeting?" I turned to her, the memory still fragile. "He cried," I said. "And I didn't." She nodded, understanding without prying. "And did it help?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said, then admitted, "And no. Both can be true." We sat down to eat, the room warm with candlelight. When our hands brushed across the table, I didn't pull away. She didn't either. A letter I didn't expect. 2 days later, as I cleared some old mail, an envelope with a government seal arrived. Not taxes. Not court-related. It was from the Portland Education Foundation. I opened it. "Dear Mr. Ford, we wanted to inform you that due to your generous property donation, the board has unanimously voted to establish the Ford Family Scholarship Fund in your honor. This fund will support low-income students pursuing education degrees. Your home is not just a donation, it is a legacy." I sat back in my chair. Legacy. A word that tasted bittersweet. Jennifer and Michael had almost cost me my life for this very house, and now it would shape the futures of children who needed hope. Mary would have loved that. For the first time since the ordeal began, tears finally came. Not from fear, not from betrayal, but from something softer. Gratitude, relief, purpose. I wiped them away and let out a long breath. It was time to move forward. Christmas Eve. Barbara and I spent Christmas Eve together as promised. She arrived with a bottle of wine and a scarf wrapped around her neck. Inside the house, soft music played, the fire crackled, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man haunted. We talked for hours about childhoods, careers, regrets, dreams. I told her things I hadn't shared with anyone since Mary passed. At one point, she said something that stayed with me. "You're allowed to rebuild without guilt." And maybe for the first time, I believed her. A new truth. After she left that night, I stood at the window watching snowfall under the streetlight. Everything glowed. And there, in the silent winter night, a truth surfaced. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was healing. And that frightened me more than anything before because healing meant hope. And hope meant opening myself to life again. To joy. To fear. To love. To the unknown. The letter arrived on a quiet morning just after Christmas. Snow still clung to the railings of the porch, and the world outside felt muted, soft, almost kind. I picked up the mail like any other day, not expecting anything unusual. Bills, a charity pamphlet, coupon booklet, and then an envelope with handwriting I recognized immediately. My breath stopped. Mary's sister, Ellen. We hadn't spoken properly in nearly 8 years, not out of animosity, but because after Mary's funeral, grief pulled each of us into different corners of the world. She had no idea about Michael, no idea about Jennifer, no idea about the disaster that had almost ended me. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a letter, long, thoughtful, written with the kind of careful handwriting only people of her generation still used. But only one sentence truly hit me. I heard something has happened with the kids. Are you all right?" I sat down slowly. How did she know? I stared at the page, my heart beating hard, each pulse reminding me that peace, even the fragile peace I'd managed to rebuild, could be shattered without warning. I read on. "A neighbor of yours called my house 2 days ago. She was worried. She said the police were at your home on Thanksgiving. I tried calling your old number, no answer. I tried calling Michael, no response. So I'm writing to you instead. A neighbor. Someone had seen the flashing lights. Someone had cared enough to try to reach family. I folded the letter and set it on the table. The past I'd tried so hard to protect, to seal away quietly, had begun to slip through the cracks. For a moment, I felt the old fear again. Not the fear of dying, but the fear of being seen. Of people knowing I'd failed as a father. Of people discovering that the house Mary and I tried so hard to fill with kindness had turned into a place where poison was poured into holiday wine. But then something else happened. I realized I didn't feel shame. Not anymore. I had survived. I had fought back. And I had saved myself from the people who tried to take everything. I unfolded the letter again, and this time, I let myself read it fully. Not with fear, but with acceptance. Calling Ellen. Took me an hour before I picked up the phone. When Ellen answered, her voice cracked the same way it had when she cried at Mary's funeral. "Dit? Is that you?" "It's me," I said quietly. "Oh, thank God. I've been worried sick." Her concern was immediate, genuine, unfiltered. And something inside me softened after months of guarding myself from everyone, even from good people. "I'm okay," I told her. "Are you really?" she asked. I hesitated. "No," I admitted. "But I will be." She didn't pressure me. She didn't ask for every detail. She simply said, "When you're ready to talk, I'll be here." And she meant it. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of family again. Not the broken, toxic imitation Michael and Jennifer had created, but the real kind, people who care simply because they care. When I hung up, I realized something profound. The world had not abandoned me. I had simply stopped reaching out. The fireplace conversation. That evening, Barbara visited again. She saw the letter resting open on the coffee table. "Family?" she asked. "Mary's sister," I said. She sat beside me, her shoulder touching mine softly. "Good news or bad news?" "A bit of both," I said. "But honest." Barbara nodded. "Honest is good." We sat quietly for a moment. The fireplace crackled in its familiar rhythm. "She wants to visit," I said. "And do you want that?" After a long pause, I whispered, "Yes, I think I do." Barbara smiled gently. "Then you should." There were no lectures, no probing questions, just support, the kind I'd spent years offering others, but never letting myself receive. I turned toward her, touched by her presence. "You know," I said, "I never thought someone would be sitting here with me again, like this." Barbara met my eyes. Life has a way of surprising us, especially when we think we've seen everything. Her hand found mine, and for once I didn't pull away. Building something new. The following weeks became a season of reconstruction. Not with hammers and nails, but with conversations, healing, and awakening. Barbara and I spent more time together. The scholarship fund gained momentum. The house felt warmer, safer, alive. For the first time in years, I envisioned a future. A future not defined by fear or betrayal, but by connection. A future where I wasn't just surviving but living. A future where love could grow again, even in winter. I redecorated the living room. I started reading the biographies Barbara gave me. I even joined a community book club. Small steps, but they were mine. Final closure. One quiet night, as snow fell softly outside, I opened the letters Michael had sent me, the ones I'd tucked away. Reading them no longer hurt. They no longer controlled me. They no longer felt like chains. They felt like chapters. Painful chapters, yes, but chapters that belonged behind me, not ahead. I placed them into a box, labeled it past, closed the lid. Not with anger, not with grief, with closure. The last page. Months later, on a warm spring morning, I walked through my garden. New plants sprouting, fresh life emerging from cold ground. Barbara joined me, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed me one with a smile. "You look peaceful," she said. "I am," I replied. And as I watched sunlight spill across the porch, the same porch where police once stood, where fear once lived, I realized the truth. The house wasn't a place of danger anymore. It wasn't a trap. It wasn't a battlefield. It was home again. Finally. And I was home too.